I never thought the day would come when the man I trusted most would look me in the eyes and call me ordinary. Not unkind. Not unworthy. Just ordinary. The word stung more than if he had screamed at me. Because in Amir's eyes, ordinary wasn't neutral. It was pathetic. We had been together for almost 5 years. We weren't rich, but we had comfort. We laughed over home-cooked meals. We planned simple holidays. I believed those little luxuries were enough. I believed I was enough. But when Amir's career took a turn upward, a promotion at his father's real estate firm, invitations to charity galas, exposure to people dripping in diamonds, everything about me began to shrink in his world. At first it was small comments. Why don't you wear makeup more often? Maybe you should think about upgrading your wardrobe. People notice these things. Could you try not to bring that old handbag? It looks outdated. I brushed them off, telling myself he was just adjusting to a new circle. But soon, the comments became comparisons. You should see how Lena carries herself. She just has this class. You know, in my office, most wives have drivers and luxury cars. They don't take taxis everywhere. Lena. That name would come to haunt me. She was the daughter of one of Amir's new business contacts. Wealthy, polished, dripping in labels from head to toe. When she walked into a room, you could hear the click of her heels before you even saw her. And Amir, he noticed. One evening, he invited me to a dinner party his firm was hosting at a 5-star hotel. It was supposed to be a chance for me to meet the right people, as he put it. I wore my best black dress, simple but elegant. I thought I looked fine. But the moment we arrived, I felt swallowed whole. Chandeliers glittered above us. Champagne flowed like water, and every woman there sparkled in sequins and silk. And then she appeared. Lena. Her dress was something out of a fashion magazine. Her jewelry practically blinding under the lights. She leaned in to greet Amir with a smile that was just a little too familiar. And when she glanced at me, her polite smile didn't reach her eyes. Throughout the night, Amir floated toward her like a moth to flame. He introduced me, yes, but his words were flat, as though embarrassed. This is my girlfriend, she's still working on her career. I wanted to disappear into the carpet. 2 weeks later, Amir sat me down. No shouting. No fighting. Just cold, clear words. I think we should end this. You're wonderful, but we're just not aligned anymore. My life is moving in a direction that demands more. You deserve someone simple like you, not someone with my ambitions. Simple. Ordinary. Not aligned. He might as well have stabbed me. And then came the twist of the knife. The very next weekend, photos surfaced on social media. Amir and Lena, arms entwined, smiling on the red carpet of a luxury gala. She in a sparkling gown. He in a tailored tuxedo. The caption. Power couple goals. The days that followed blurred together. I cried until my body ached. I deleted my social media just to stop seeing their faces. Every headline that mentioned their names felt like salt rubbed into my wounds. My friends tried to console me. You're better off without him. But I couldn't shake the voice in my head. Not good enough. Not luxurious enough. One night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the handbag Amir once mocked. And something inside me shifted. Why did I believe his definition of worth? Why did I let him measure me by handbags and champagne? I didn't want revenge, not yet. What I wanted was respect. And I decided, then and there, I would build a life so powerful, so unshakably mine, that no man could ever call me ordinary again. It started small. I signed up for night classes in business management. I polished my resume and applied for jobs outside my comfort zone. I worked during the day, studied at night, and slept in between. Was it exhausting? Yes. But every time I felt like quitting, I remembered Amir's words. You're not aligned with my world. And I swore to myself, one day, I'll own my world. Within a year, I landed a position at a mid-tier marketing firm. I started at the bottom, but I worked like my life depended on it. I volunteered for projects nobody wanted. I stayed late. I networked. And slowly, people began to notice me. Not for what I wore, but for what I delivered. 2 years after Amir left, I stood in the office of my new boss, holding a signed contract from a luxury brand client we had been chasing for months. You pulled this off? He asked, eyebrows raised. Yes, I said, my voice steady. He smiled. You just earned yourself a promotion. That moment felt like fireworks. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what I lacked, but by what I had achieved. I moved into a new apartment. Not extravagant, but modern, bright, with a view that reminded me of how far I'd come. I bought my first car, a sleek, second-hand BMW. It wasn't brand new, but it was mine. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see ordinary. I saw extraordinary. One evening, after a long day at work, I stopped by a high-end cafe near the office. As I waited for my coffee, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Still drinking plain lattes? I turned. Amir. He looked the same, polished, smug. But there was a shadow in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. I heard you're working in marketing now, he said casually. That's cute. Goo. The word hung in the air. But instead of shrinking, I smiled. Yes. And we just signed a 7-figure contract. The flicker in his eyes. That was my first taste of revenge. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just satisfying. That night, lying in my sleek apartment, I replayed the encounter. The way he tried to belittle me. The way he still carried himself as if he had won. But I realized something. He hadn't won. Not really. Lena had money. He had status. But I had fire. And I wasn't done climbing. Not until I reached a place so high, Amir would have no choice but to look up at me. That was the beginning of my plan. Not just to succeed, but to become the kind of success that would haunt him. The weeks after I saw Amir at the cafe felt different. For the first time since he walked out of my life, I wasn't drowning in his shadow. Instead, I felt the thrill of standing in my own light. But that small encounter had sparked something inside me that I couldn't ignore. If he thought my growth was cute, I would make sure the next time he saw me, it would terrify him. I poured every ounce of myself into my career. My firm was expanding and opportunities multiplied. I wasn't just showing up at work anymore. I was owning every room I walked into. I spoke with confidence. I closed deals with clients that others said were impossible. Slowly, my name became synonymous with results. And results, I learned, are a currency more valuable than money. The first luxury item I ever bought with my own bonus wasn't a handbag or a dress. It was a watch. A sleek, timeless piece with silver edges that caught the light every time I moved my hand. Not because I wanted people to see it, but because I wanted to remind myself, with every glance, that my time was no longer wasted on anyone who didn't value me. Months passed, and with each milestone I grew bolder. I started attending events, not as someone's plus one, but as an invited guest. At first, I felt nervous, surrounded by people in couture gowns and tailored suits. But then something shifted. They weren't better than me. They just wore shinier clothes. And I realized that luxury wasn't about what was on your body. It was about what you carried inside yourself. Still, I couldn't ignore the whispers. Every now and then, I'd hear about Amir and Lena. Their photos still appeared in social circles, all glitz and glam, their smiles perfectly staged. But behind those curated images, rumors began to leak. Arguments at parties. Disagreements about money. A failed investment Amir had pushed too hard. I didn't seek the gossip, but when it reached my ears, I tucked it away like little treasures in a box. Not to obsess, but to prepare. My turning point came one winter evening. I was standing in the boardroom of a luxury brand client, presenting a campaign that would redefine their image. The room was full of executives, people who normally dismissed anyone under 40. But that day, as I spoke, they listened. My voice didn't tremble. My ideas landed. And when the contract was signed, it was my hand they shook. I walked out of that boardroom with more than just a contract. I walked out with a new identity. I was no longer the girl Amir had left behind. I was a woman who could stand in front of millionaires and make them nod in agreement. Soon after, I upgraded my apartment. No more modest views of the city. Now I lived in a high-rise where the skyline stretched like a crown at night. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city lights. And sometimes I would just stand there, glass of wine in hand, thinking about how far I had come. From crying on my bed to owning a view that most people only dream of. And yet, I knew this wasn't the end. Success was sweet, but revenge, that required patience. One evening, as I was leaving an industry gala, I spotted a familiar figure near the entrance. Amir. His suit was as sharp as ever, but there was something different about his posture. A slight slump, like the world was pressing harder on his shoulders. He saw me, and for a moment his eyes widened. "You look incredible," he said, almost as if the words slipped out before he could stop them. I smiled politely. "Thank you." He glanced at the car waiting for me outside. A sleek black Mercedes my firm had provided. His jaw tightened. "So you've done well for yourself." I tilted my head, keeping my tone light. "Better than cute, don't you think?" The flicker of recognition in his eyes told me he remembered our last conversation. But I didn't linger. I slipped into the car, leaving him standing there, his compliment hanging in the air like unfinished business. That night, I realized something powerful. The best revenge wasn't about humiliating him in public. It wasn't about screaming or throwing insults. The best revenge was quiet, graceful, undeniable success. The kind that spoke for itself. So I doubled down. I built connections with international clients, expanded my network, and eventually launched my own consultancy. It was a risk, stepping away from a stable position into something entirely my own, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew what I was capable of. The consultancy took off faster than I imagined. Within a year, I had clients in Dubai, London, and New York. I traveled for work, stayed in 5-star hotels, and attended dinners where the bill for wine alone was more than my old monthly rent. At first, it felt surreal, but soon it became normal. I had entered the world Amir once told me I would never belong to. And yet, I belonged here more than he ever did. Because while he chased status through other people, I had built mine from the ground up. One evening, during a trip to Paris for a client meeting, I opened my hotel window to see the Eiffel Tower glittering in the distance. I thought of Amir. I thought of the night he called me ordinary. And I laughed. Out loud. The sound surprised even me. Not bitter, not sad, just amused. Because the girl he discarded had become the woman he could never reach again. But fate has a strange sense of timing. A few months later, I attended a private charity auction in my city. The kind of event where people bid on luxury watches and paintings while sipping champagne. I was there with clients, dressed in a gown that flowed like liquid gold. I felt confident, untouchable. And then I saw him. Amir. Except this time, the confidence he once wore like armor was gone. His suit was still expensive, but his eyes told another story. They darted around the room, uneasy, searching. He spotted me almost instantly. For a moment he froze. Then slowly he walked over. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said, voice softer than I remembered. "Why wouldn't I be?" I replied. He hesitated. "You've changed." I raised an eyebrow. "No, Amir. I didn't change. I just stopped believing your version of who I was." For the first time, I saw something in him I had never seen before. Regret. But I wasn't ready to deliver my revenge yet. Not here, not in front of people. True revenge, I realized, needed the perfect stage. A moment where he would come to me, stripped of pride, begging for something he could no longer have. And so I waited. Because life has a way of giving people exactly what they deserve. It didn't take long for the cracks in Amir's perfect life to show. I didn't go looking for updates, but people in our circles talked. Business deals that collapsed. A lavish lifestyle that was bleeding more money than it earned. Lena, with all her sparkle, apparently wasn't interested in standing beside a man who was sliding downward. The photos of them together grew fewer and fewer, until one day, they disappeared entirely. I wasn't surprised. Luxury, when built on someone else's wealth, is as fragile as glass. One crack, and the whole illusion shatters. Months passed, and I hardly thought about him. My world had grown too vast, too bright. I was traveling, signing contracts, expanding my consultancy to places I had once only dreamed of. I was busy living. But life, with its dark sense of humor, had one last encounter planned. It was a rainy evening when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, silk robe draped over me, a glass of champagne in my hand, and there he was. Amir. But not the Amir I remembered. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and his eyes carried heavy shadows. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain poured behind him, soaking his once polished shoes. Finally, he said, "I didn't know where else to go." I tilted my head. "Strange. I thought you had all the luxury in the world." His lips trembled. "It's gone. Lena left. The business is falling apart. I was wrong about everything. About you." There it was. The moment I had once fantasized about during sleepless nights. The man who discarded me like I was nothing now stood on my doorstep, desperate, broken. I let the silence stretch. I sipped my champagne slowly, deliberately, the bubbles catching the light from my apartment. Behind me, the skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silent reminder of the empire I had built. "You know, Amir," I said softly, "when you left me, you told me I wasn't aligned with your world. You were right. I wasn't. My world was so much bigger than yours could ever be." He stepped closer, his voice cracking. "Please. Just give me another chance. We can start over. I can change. I laughed. Not cruelly, but with genuine amusement. Change? Amir, I didn't spend years rebuilding myself just to hand my life back to the man who broke me. I didn't rise to prove you wrong. I rose to prove myself right. He looked at me like a drowning man watching the shore slip further away. So that's it. I raised my glass, the champagne fizzing softly. That's it. Luxury isn't about who you stand beside. It's about knowing your worth. And tonight, Amir, I've never been richer. Before he could respond, I closed the door. The click of the lock echoed like a final chapter closing. I leaned against the door for a moment. Not because I doubted my choice, but because the weight of years had finally lifted. The revenge I thought I wanted, screaming, blaming, punishing, wasn't what satisfied me. This was better. This was silence, power, dignity. I walked back to my window, the city glowing like a constellation at my feet. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who cried over being ordinary. She was gone now. In her place stood a woman who had built herself from the ground up, whose success was her shield, whose peace was her crown. And as I lifted my glass toward the skyline, I whispered to myself, he left me for luxury, but I became the luxury. The rain outside continued to fall, washing the city clean. And in that moment I knew. My story wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. The revenge was complete.